Welcome to Local History, Legends, and Lore. I'm Julie Lugo Cerra. I'm your host today, and I have two local girls with me who went to work for MGM Studios, and we're going to talk to them about their experiences. On my left, immediately, is Jean Barker, who I can call Aunt Jean.
You may.
Welcome, thank you. And June Caldwell, who went to work for the studios, and actually I got to deliver mail to her when she was working for Eddie Mannix, who headed the operations of the studios in the 60s. So it's nice to have you both here. Thank you for coming back. The studio, MGM Studios, was actually the first studio that was built in Culver City, the first major studio. And it's my understanding that Harry Culver enticed Thomas Ince to build the studio there to offer an economic base to the city. And when you were working there in its heyday, and tell me when you started working there, both of you, it's my understanding that there were many, many people, thousands.
5,000 when we were there.
5,000.
When we started there.
It was a city.
Sure was.
It was like a city within a city.
It had everything, yeah.
When did you start working there? June, you got there first?
I started after high school. My sister became pregnant. She was working there for 5 years, and she suggested that I apply as a messenger. And in those days, you had to work 6 weeks in the messenger department before you could be transferred into any of the departments. So this was a wonderful opportunity. And so I was 17, just graduated from high school, and the first day I was hired was October 10th, 1942, which was the day of the big musicals and the classic films that were filmed. I had witnessed, previous to that, they're making Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind in the local community.
Because you had lived in the city.
I was very excited about having this opportunity. So I went to work as a messenger, worked for 6 weeks, and I was transferred into W.S. Van Dyke II's office. He was a legendary director at that time. He had completed 88 films in his lifetime. He was only 54 at the time. And after 6 weeks, on my 18th birthday, the 2nd of December, I became a secretary in his office. So that was my first secretarial position there.
That's pretty young to start as a
Very
secretary.
exciting for such a glamorous, exciting man.
And when did you start, Aunt Jean?
I started in February of '43. I went to UCLA and, like a fool, decided to quit and go to work at MGM because that was the place to be. And it was great because it had always been boy messengers before the war. So when the boys went off to war, they hired girls. And we were the belles of the ball for a while because it was all so new and we were all young and innocent and sweet and all that. And it was a fun place to work.
I bet it was.
It really was. And like June said, the 5,000 people, it was unbelievable the size that my dad worked there at that time.
And
too.
take a look at this shot.
Oh,
This is the East Gate, which
Yeah.
was bordered on Grant Street, which was in front of the Thalberg Building, and Ince Way along to the right.
And
Now-
right by the guard shack, it was the messenger room, and that's where we started.
On the corner.
And then later I worked down the hall in a different area. Eventually became the department head of the messengers.
Upstairs over that was the script
script
department.
Oh,
with
was
the
it?
steps. The steps that went up there.
Okay.
The steps, the steps were open steps, and when I first went to work there, they said that at first they wanted the girls to wear skirts, but that didn't last very long when they realized, and that's when we first got to wear slacks.
That was the TV4 building when I worked there in the 60s.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was where a lot of the
became
TV was done.
television.
And then it was at the back of that building that the music department
Yeah, Johnny
was.
Green. I used to listen to Mario Lanza singing down the hall and Frank Sinatra, and it was a great place to see all of the things that were going on.
They had
Gene Powell.
marvelous MGM orchestra, in-house orchestra.
And John Green was the
Yeah.
I think we have a
Conductor.
photo that you brought us of some of the messenger girls.
Oh yeah, there we were.
And you're in the middle.
I'm in the middle in Bobby socks, for gosh sakes. Yeah, I was no longer a messenger then. I was in the office because you notice the girls in slacks, they were the messengers. And the girls on my left and right, one was the dispatcher that sent them out to the lot, and the one on my left was the administration building dispatcher. And they had the guides that took tours to the studio from that end. So it was a great place to learn what was going on in all the departments. So
Yes,
when it
because
came
you
time
had to walk the lots.
transfer out, you knew what was going on. It was a marvelous entry into the studio.
So now you were a messenger at the beginning, and did the boys, when the boys came back, did they take over again, or did you still have girl messengers?
No, we had the girls. Some of the boys did come back. A couple of the boys that had moved up to a receptionist duty. That was your next step up in the messenger department. And a couple of them came back from the service. But for the most part, the girls stayed on and boys got other jobs.
Do we have a picture? I'm sorry.
Bob Peterson, who owns the magazines,
Yes, Motor Trend.
Motor Trends, all of that. He was a messenger boy in the publicity department when we were there.
Is he the one who started the Peterson Automotive Museum?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
They have a Helms coach there. Even,
Yes, they do.
from
I've
Culver
been
City.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a real
fun.
nice kid.
Do we have a picture of the Thalberg Building? That's it.
There
Okay.
it is.
Now, that was built in 1938 and named for Irving Thalberg, who was the head of production. But he unfortunately died at a very young age.
In the messenger department, they called it the NAB, the New Administration Building.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Even though
right.
years later it was no longer new, it was always the New
Right.
Administration
those-
Building.
In those days, it was a beautiful building because of the way it was laid out, the offices and everything else. It was done in Art Deco.
Right. And that is actually still one of the two landmark structures on what is now the Sony lot. And they have mandated, the city has mandated that they retain the exterior
Oh, great.
of both of them, that and the colonnade on the front.
It was an interesting three-story building, but it had an executive dining room on the 4th floor and also a gym and sauna. And we had a chiropractor, Dr. Mitchell. That,
Really?
Yes, I remember celebrities coming from other studios like Humphrey Bogart and other people that had back problems. They all came to Dr. Mitchell on the 4th floor. They just loved, and we could go to him too.
Really? Now, where was Louis B. Mayer's office in that building?
Louis B. Mayer's was the center in the back towards Culver Boulevard, and he had a beautiful
On the
office.
3rd floor.
The interior of it, they had a secretarial entrance, which I eventually worked for 4 different Lowe's presidents from the very beginning. But anyway, I was fortunate to be able to work in that office because it was a beautiful layout. And when I first went to work for Mr. Mannix, L.B. Mayer was in residence at that time, and he had a beautiful inside office with a piano and a beautiful oval kidney-shaped desk, white desk inside, and the walls were done in a white leather. And he had a side room with a refrigerator and a daybed and a shower and a private elevator that he could leave the building, go down, and be picked up in the back of the building.
Which is still there.
Which no one else,
Yeah.
could
Right.
see.
And then at the beginning, I remember that building was actually not on the lot at the beginning. It was at the edge
No.
of the lot.
Yeah.
And as you walked into the front, up the steps into the Thalberg Building, there was a reception area.
Right.
And there was a receptionist who was apparently, you said the step up from,
Yes, yeah, that was
For the
an
messenger.
increase, yeah.
and when I was a messenger there and a tour guide, we got to go relieve people. And it was a very high desk, and
You could stand there normally. They had high stools to sit
Right.
at, yeah.
so
And
tell
they
me
had
about
a
the activities.
And they had
button
the
to get
push
in.
button. Person couldn't come in without the receptionist pushing the button.
Yeah.
And you always had to announce any of the wives.
One thing about the doors in the Thalberg Building, they were very heavy and soundproof. And in the offices upstairs, it was the same way. I had in Eddie Mannix's office, I had to push a button for someone to get into the door, and also I did that in Mayor's office with any of the presidents. In fact, I had a rather strange situation with Frank Sinatra one time. when I went to high school, I adored him and loved, you know, all of us were swooning over him. And of course, when he walked into my office, I had to tell him, I had to stop him from walking right through into Mr. L.B. Mayer's office, and he was pretty unhappy with me because he walked through and just hit the door with thinking that he could walk right in, and of course he ran right into the door because I didn't. I said, no, I have to announce you, Mr. Sinatra, first. So he was rather surprised at that.
And you had to announce wives, I think?
Oh, yes.
Any wives that came to visit their producer, director, husbands would always want to go right through and see their husbands, and they couldn't go through either until we called upstairs to give the warning that your wife's on the way up.
And who are we worried about being in the office with the husband?
Well, any of the people in the building were protected. That was something that Howard Strickland, one of his edicts, that you always protected anybody that worked in the studio from publicity, bad publicity, or anything happening to them. So we had a police force, we had a police department at the studio, Whitey Henry, we had a fire department, we had a hospital, we were a little city. We had a dentist we could go to.
The dentist was located in that TV4 building.
In the building where I
inside
was,
right, upstairs.
Upstairs. The international department was in there.
The idea was that you didn't leave the lot. The most important people, of course, were the stars, and if they needed any of these facilities, why, it was available to them.
And you had the commissary.
Oh, yes.
So you'd eat lunch. It was my understanding that Louis B. Mayer thought that production would be better if...
Well, yes, and they had wonderful food. I have a menu from in here.
Tell us what we could have for lunch if we were there in 1940 something.
What is the date on that one?
1941, and everybody loved eating at the commissary because they had a table for the sound department, they had a table for the art department, and everybody in that department could sit at that table and order lunch. And they had wonderful salads, a sandwich, MGM special steak sandwich was 55 cents at that time. And they served from 11:30 to 2 p.m. Today's soups were 15 cents.
In addition to the commissary, they had the
Crab meat cocktail.
June. What was the coffee shop in addition to the commissary?
Yes,
it
they
was
had
open earlier. We
a
could always
coffee
go
shop
there
that was
for-
separate, and when I was in high school, I went to MGM. I had the opportunity to play in their studio orchestra at night, and I came on the lot at night, and the cafeteria was not, it wasn't a cafeteria, it was a cafe, but you sat at the counter, and they baked the most wonderful pies and pastries at the studio. They had a chef that did all of these things because all of these people were sophisticated, and they had the best of everything.
Yeah, I
But this
understand
is
that-
rather interesting, the prices in
For
those
sure,
days.
for sure.
And I thought that might be.
Yeah, I don't think we're
Interesting.
going to get anything there today for 55
No.
cents.
I don't think so
I think we're going to have trouble with that. But they still have wonderful food. in
Oh, they
that
had
building.
wonderful food.
When I was there recently, it's different. It used to be a wide open commissary, and you could see the stars and people coming in their costumes for lunch, and it was just a fun place to go for
And the
meals.
executives went to the executive dining room, a lot
Right.
of them, in the Thalberg Building because it was accessible to their offices, and they could chit-chat about business and, you know.
Sure.
When I was still a messenger girl, I was asked to work one evening at the executive dining room. They were putting it on for some exhibitors or something, and Jimmy Durante was one of the entertainers that evening. And I remember being absolutely fascinated because he broke up the most gorgeous piano. That was one of his shticks that he did, and he literally tore that piano apart. It was,
Sounds like Durante.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He came into the Thalberg Building one time. He walked up to the desk and he wanted to see Mr. Pasternak, who was his producer. And I said, you'll have to wait. Another thing, they have to be announced regardless of who they were. And I said, Mr. Durante, you have to wait while I call the office. and I called the office, and Mr. Pasternak wasn't available, and I said, "You'll have to wait a few minutes." And he looked at me and he said, "Young lady, I wait for no one." And he turned around on his heels and walked out. And that was typical of celebrities. They were very important to themselves.
But on the other hand, when
There
you were in the
was-
Thalberg Building, didn't you have occasion when Louis B. Mayer himself would
That
actually
was-
come out?
That was the time. That
Oh,
was
yes.
different. This man
Who
came.
was that?
Howard Hughes. When he came to see L.B. Mayer, he had an old Chevy and he wore tennis shoes, and he'd pull up in front, and we would call upstairs and say, "Mr. Hughes is here," and L.B. would come literally running out to meet him and get in his car, and they'd drive off because Howard Hughes really wanted to do business in
In the studio?
the studio. Yeah.
That's a treat. That's a treat. I think we have a map of, or an aerial of Lot 1.
Of Lot 1.
There it is.
There we go.
Yeah, that's the main street.
Yeah, that is
Going
Main
west.
Street. That's an old picture, and you
That's
have,
how it was when we were there.
I
Yeah.
believe isn't that stage 15?
The biggies.
No, that's
No.
3, 4, 5, and 6.
Five.
That's the four
That's the
historic
highest one.
stages.
They had
Five's
a
where they did
opera
the
set in there.
Follies and all of
There were
them.
2 of them that opened up
Yeah,
onto each other.
right,
One was the audience side, and the other
One-
was the
yeah.
stage side. And they did the Ziegfeld Follies. They did the Busby Berkeley musicals there.
They also had trams that ran from the East Gate all the way through the studio.
Out to the
And
lot
then it
two.
went to Lot 2, and it
Right.
also went down Overland Boulevard because I had to deliver mail to the construction department, the mill. I had to go to Lot 2, which the cartoon studio was on Lot 2, and then they had the outdoor sets.
That's where
And
Hanna
that
and
was-
Barbera were initially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then I had to go on down to Lot 3, which was at the corner of Jefferson and Overland, and they had the circus sets and the lake out there and the French
Where
sets.
Showboat
And
stuff.
also Mickey Rooney, when he made the Andy Hardy series, that they were all outdoor sets.
Right
with
on Lot
palms.
2. Right.
In the messenger department, the different routes that you took, because the mail went out every 15 minutes, they're all named. And if you had the Lot 2, that was called Siberia, because
Yep.
it took longer. It was a half-hour route, and you walked all day long.
walked the whole-
You can't believe some of the kids with blisters and couldn't keep it up. And,
They had cut that out by the 60s.
Yeah, no,
Well,
I mean,
we
this
didn't
was
think
all
anything of
day
it.
long.
Yeah, they had different routes, but it was all in Lot 1. Nobody went over to Lot 2, but the tram driver.
The tours went a lot too when we were
Yeah,
there.
there was a fellow by the name of Wally who was the tram driver when I was there, and he had this wispy kind of strawberry blonde hair, and he probably knew more about the studio than anybody else because he listened to everything.
Yeah.
And we would, I don't know whether you did, but we would just jump our tours right on the outdoor
Yeah,
tram
yeah.
and then just go along.
Well,
and
the
have a great
extras
time.
rode that too. Coming after all, it's a huge set,
Lot,
and
yeah.
and 30 stages
Right,
that we had.
right, yeah. They're
So
down
there was
to
a lot of ground to
22
cover.
now.
Shorts department, directors' buildings, and
Makeup
also
department,
the
wardrobe?
cutting departments. And we had to go upstairs to the editorial and also publicity, which
The art
Advertising-
department.
Advertising was up there.
yeah, and Howard Strickling's, the original entrance to the studio was on Washington where the columns are, which is closed today. But that was all open, and when I was a kid, we'd go and stand on the corner by St. Augustine's Church on the opposite corner while the stars drove in and out, and we'd wave and try to get autographs originally.
There are a lot of people who have autograph books still from that entrance and also from the East Gate that we saw the
Eastgate,
picture
yeah.
of too.
I wish I still
Yeah.
had mine.
So-
So I would
Virgie
say
Eskridge.
you became starstruck rather with Magic Land when you lived in Culver.
We also had the block, actually your father you mentioned, oh wait a minute here. And who is
Oh, there
this?
we are.
Aunt Jean, that's you on the right.
That's me on the right, and a
Okay.
friend of ours from grammar school, and the second one, Shirley Berriman, and then June is the third one. And the other girl's name is Pat, and I can't remember her last name. And we were working at one of the golf picnics over in Fox Hills,
Studio Club
studio
picnics.
club picnics.
Ah.
And we could
We
play
had regular
golf.
parties with the studio club we all
God, they were
belonged to.
marvelous. Every
Now, was
had-
the studio club the credit union?
No.
No,
No?
well, no,
No.
the credit union was part of the studio
Oh, was it?
club.
Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, that was the beginning. Mal Kaplan got the idea for the health and welfare for the entire industry because he was at the studio and he was part of that original studio club group. And then it went industry-wide.
Yeah, we had, besides the picnics, they had annual parties.
Let's take a look
Oh,
at this
that's
on
the
Washington
Washington
Boulevard.
Boulevard. Yeah.
That was my grandfather's property that my father managed. And that was the old retake room on Washington Boulevard.
That's where I got my first illegal drink.
It was the local watering place. Yeah. Yeah.
I can remember many stars from when we made Mutiny on the Bounty. The English stars would come in there, and they, Richard was in that.
Harris?
Richard Harris, and
And Burton?
oh
Yeah, they used to come in the back because
No,
the parking
Burton.
lot was in the back.
yes,
So they'd
they
come
used
out
to
of the
approach it
east
walking-
East
gate
and go up.
and then go in the back door of the retake room, which was very dark, as I recall.
Oh, sure.
Keenan Wynn was a habitué there too. And, everybody stopped in there and had a drink at night and enjoyed.
Sometimes in the afternoon, as I recall.
Yeah, right.
We
So-
were able to leave the lot sometimes in the afternoon and go there for a break.
No kidding.
Well, we had, half an hour off or something, and that was where you heard about what was going on at the studio.
Certainly did.
I see. I bet you did. Oh, and here are the lovely ladies again.
Oh, that was over in Catalina with Friends on a Boat. That's June on the right, me in the middle, and our friend Eveline on the left. Eveline's dad was a fireman at MGM. And my dad worked in the paint department, and June's dad didn't work at
And
the
this
studio.
was Evelyn's.
That was on her boat.
Yeah,
We
in
were all
Catalina.
Culver Grammar School friends.
And you went to work for the studios together,
Yeah.
and you remained friends all these years.
Right.
That's an Avalon.
Speaking off
And
on.
her husband was Eveline's husband was a
He was a
stuntman, wasn't he?
stuntman.
Pete
Yeah.
Kellett.
Pete.
Yeah.
So speaking of parties and all, it seems to me that there were some stories about Red Skelton and dances and
Oh Lord, they had the first
Yeah.
one I went to was at Ocean Park. Ocean Park had two piers, and then they
Big
had a
Pier
dance,
Ballroom.
Big Pier Ballroom, and they had the Ocean Park Pier, and then they had the Casino Gardens, and that's where they held that party for the employees. And it was lovely. I mean, they
Studio
had
club party.
everything. They had dinners, and the people from the studio, the stars, would entertain. And Red Skelton, I remember, he was so funny. He went through a whole routine that he later did on TV. The Guzzler's Gin number.
Guzzler's Gin, yeah.
Guzzler's Gin, yeah.
And Jimmy Durante entertained.
Yeah.
And they asked all these actors and actresses if they would appear, which I thought was a wonderful thing for the employees at the studio.
And they had all
made
sorts
it fun.
of prizes and drawings and things. I remember winning
Yeah.
things at those deals.
and George Murphy.
George Murphy,
Murphy
he and
entertained?
Doris Sherry, and one person I can't remember did a dance, a soft shoe dance at Ocean Park. Then
One of
they
the
later
dancers.
had them at the Florentine Gardens, Earl Carroll's.
Florentine Gardens
where was that?
popular too.
That was in Hollywood, and they had
On
one at the
Hollywood
Riviera
Boulevard.
Country Club. That was a lovely one. And Pan Pacific Auditorium, which was an ice skating huge auditorium. They had, because there were so many
Usually
people
monthly.
that went to these things.
Monthly?
No. The big parties were annually, but then they had the
Yeah,
picnic.
but they
yeah.
had picnics and
Yeah.
things like that we, and the people, when I started at the studio, were very outgoing. And my first employer, W.S. Van Dyke, he was so popular with his entire crew because he always ate with them and enjoyed being, part of the crew, regardless of who he was.
You brought a poster that I'd like to concentrate on if we can.
Oh, yes. This is the original group at MGM.
The first big anniversary.
First big
Tilt it down.
anniversary shot. And this was
Oh, that's
people that
odd,
we were
yeah.
most familiar with, Lionel Barrymore, and Greer Garson, Hedy Lamarr, Lucille Ball. And what year was that? That was 43, wasn't it?
The first one down
first
below.
one-
43 is at the
43.
bottom, then 49
This
in
is
the middle.
49, and this was the group that was out. You can see Lassie, and you can see Ethel Barrymore, and here's Fred Astaire and June Allison. Then this is the last one in the 50s
57.
that was done. And these are the people, possibly Esther Williams and Sid
she's all right
Charisse. Dan Johnson was someone that was
Yeah.
most active at the studio from the time I started.
These are
He was
great.
very popular.
And they're signed.
Yeah.
And he's still
amazing.
he's still entertaining.
Van Johnson.
Yes.
So,
I'm
June,
still in the motion picture industry.
That's what I was going to
Still
ask.
connected with it because I work for Turner Entertainment Co. now, and we're in Century City, not at the studio, unfortunately. But Ted Turner purchased MGM in 1986 from Kurt Kerkorian. Kurt Kerkorian bought the studio in 1969 for $90 million, and he turned it over to Ted Turner in 1986 for $1.4 billion. So you see the money that he made.
Yeah, I guess so.
And
We're going to
Ted-
have to wrap up, but
Okay.
I wanted to also point out that you work for Roger Mayer,
Yes.
who was the president of the studio, who is the guy who was responsible for preserving the sign, the MGM sign.
Oh, definitely, Roger.
And then who is a major force in preservation of film today. And in
Yes.
fact, the first recipient of the Heart of Screenland Award from the Culver City Historical
He started
Society.
that back when he started at MGM in 1961.
Well, obviously we have more to talk about, so I want you to come back. We're going to
Wonderful.
have to do that. But
Wonderful.
anyway, thank you very, very much, and thanks so much for sharing some of your experiences.
Thank you for
Yes,
having
ma'am.
me.
Thank you.
Delightful.